Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton. They got next, so let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. I'm here, as always, with my guy, Alex Winton. And we're going to start with talking about Game 1, Grizzlies versus Lakers. And then at the end, we're going to get more into the big announcements, which Jaren Jackson Jr. was just named Defensive Player of the Year. So shout out to him. But yeah, we got to start with, because I know last week we said we were going to come back talking about Game 1. And it was definitely a disappointing Game 1. And it's one of those things where when you look at like the history, this is now their third straight Game 1 loss at home. And it's like that, I think, is the toughest part, because you're really like going into that game. It's like you're hoping that they can kind of flip that script. With this core, the only Game 1 that they won was the first playoff game most of these guys ever had, which was in Utah. So it's kind of weird that they won that first one on the road, and then they haven't been able to win a Game 1 since. Grizzlies just in history have not been good in Game 1s. So it was definitely disappointing, but not something that's like super surprising. But definitely something that, just looking forward, like I think it's definitely it's obviously a negative anytime you lose, but the fact that they lost home court advantage is the worst part. You got to get those not both of them, but when you have home court advantage, you want to get both of them. And to come out and drop Game 1, it just puts you like behind the 8 ball, I feel like, to start. So that's the thing that really worried me the most coming out of that game, is just losing home court advantage. Now, a lot of people are saying the series is over. The series is not over, obviously. It's Game 1. But the fact that you lose Game 1 at home is the worst part, just because you know how much better the Grizzlies are at home than they are on the road.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's a disappointing loss. Obviously, we're going to get more into the context of why we lost, obviously. But just, I mean, again, once we're not good on Game 1s, like you said, I think Sean might have posted it. Shout out to Sean. I think he said it was like 4-9. It's something crazy. It was like, I think we only won like 4 Game 1s ever, like in franchise history.
I think they've only won 1 Game 1 at home in franchise history.
Yeah. So, and then I think I saw a stat earlier, because obviously Jenkins is from that Coach Budenholzer tree. I think Bud is like not good at Game 1s neither. So it's just funny how all this is kind of correlating. But yeah, I mean, especially, I think the more disappointing thing about the game is that losing in terms of losing at home, to me at least, is just like we were the best home team in the league. And so it's like especially since you're not that good on the road, you need to win these games. And obviously there's certain things that they had in the game plan, and the game plan kind of just, they lived with it. But I mean, I'm not too, like, there's things that I can take away from the game to be encouraged by. Like, they played pretty well in stretches, like literally outside of the whole game, for like basically the whole game to the last like 3 or 4 minutes. I think maybe Jaren had a 3 that cut it to like 1. And then after that, then Lakers went on like a 15-20 over, like some crazy run. They were in the game the whole time. Like, and that was without Ja for like basically most of that fourth quarter. So, I think guys just, I think they'll respond tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Wednesday. But definitely kind of like just, not saying somber loss, but just the ending makes it feel a lot worse than what it was. But I do think there is, like you said, the series is not necessarily over. Now, I will say Game 2 is probably a must win, but the series is not over. You still have the games to be played. Like, we can say, like, I've seen people say series have been over before in other situations, not with just the Grizzlies, but in general. And it's like Game 2, Game 3. It's a 7-game series for a reason. Even Bain said it. Like, it's a 7-game series for a reason. They lost Game 1s and they won the series. They won a Game 1 and lost the series. Like, they've been through it. So they're not going to overreact to one game. If you do, then you're probably going to not have success. So, I think they'll come in locked in on Wednesday and be ready to go.
Yeah, and the other thing is, obviously, like the final score, that 15-0 run did kind of make it seem like it was a worse game than it actually was. But when you look at the fact, like they were down by 1 with, I think, 2.5 minutes left in the game. So it's one of those things where, you got to close the game better, obviously. But it's not like they just have to completely throw out everything they did, at least on offense. They don't have to throw out everything they did offensively. There was some stuff that worked really well. I really liked the way that Jaren attacked his matchup with LeBron. I thought that was the thing that I felt the best about coming out of that. Because, I know LeBron is getting older and everything, but it's almost like that mental thing when you think about the fact that Jaren's only 23. Like, Jaren has been watching LeBron in the finals since he was a little kid. And then you go out, first time you're playing against him in a playoff scenario, and you get a one-on-one match with them, and just him having the confidence to can take this, I have the advantage. I can take this dude. I don't care if it's one of the greatest players we've ever seen. And I think that was a big thing, just to see him go out there and have as good of a game as he did. I think that was the positive thing from the game. And then obviously that was the number one positive thing. But then on the other end, it was some of the game plan stuff. I understand not you don't expect a 32% shooter like Rui to go out there and hit 5 out of 6 from 3, but you can't leave NBA players wide open, man. This is not I know that in the past that was something that was a viable option, but when you look at the way that just the 3-point shooting has happened in the NBA, these dudes are too good to leave them wide open. And that's the thing is it's not like Rui, I don't think Rui Hachimura took a contested 3-pointer. They were all wide open shots, basically. And it's dude, after you hit 3 in a row, at some point, somebody has to step up. And I think that was the biggest thing. It's dude is wide open. You got to contest the shot. There's a couple times where it's literally looked like they were just well, he's not going to make another one. It's nah, dude, he's on one, obviously. Tonight he finished with 29 points. And then him, and then Reeves, too. It's those are two guys where maybe that's not who you're expecting to beat you, but you can't just leave you can't leave NBA players open. And I think it really stems down to the double team stuff too. Is double teaming either LeBron or AD, it didn't really end in the results that you would think. And I think part of that is because they really haven't done it all season. You can, maybe I'm wrong, but from watching all the games that I've seen, I cannot pick out a time in the regular season where they were double teaming people, whether it was Joel Embiid, whether it was Giannis, whether it was Jokic, whether it was LeBron, when they did play against them. They have not really double teamed people all season. And I feel that might be something that they need to look at is play straight up defense like you have all year. There's no reason to I feel it's maybe try to get a little bit too cute and try to do too much. Do what you've done all year. It can still work in this series. And I think that's going to be what I'm going to be looking at. It's mostly going to be on the defensive end, because I think on the offensive end, they're going to be okay, even without Ja. If Ja doesn't play, we're going to talk about that probably a little bit later. But I think they can figure out a way to score. That's not going to be a problem for them. It's going to be about getting stops.
Yeah. To your point about the defense, I think a lot of it's obviously the scheme. Jenkins is, again, I keep saying Budenholzer tree, but when a coach is from a coaching tree, they usually take some of the philosophies from the coach that they learn from, usually. And Jenkins does that a lot. It's cut clear image, same thing. We play our starters low minutes in the regular season, turn them up in the postseason. They do the defense the same way, run the offense the same way, 5-out spacing basically at times or whatnot, or 4 out 1 in. They do the same stuff. And one of the things that the Bucks do a lot, just like the Grizzlies, they give up a lot of open threes at times. And so you do get burnt by random role players by that happening. Again, like you said, you gotta get a hand up. That's probably the thing. They gotta get a contest up, and they've had times in the season where they just overhelp and do this a lot, and they get burnt, and then they can't make up the margin of error because they don't have the shooting to do it. And obviously we do have the shooting to do it, but that's obviously another thing that we didn't have yesterday, is this we just didn't make enough shots. But in terms of the defense, the thing with the doubling, they have doubled, because I remember when I went to the game against the Pelicans and they doubled. But the thing about what they did yesterday, it was a soft double, not a hard double. They did it kind of where it was the dude was in the help versus a full-on double team like we did last year with Karl-Anthony Towns, and we forcing him to get a ball up, forcing him to make that skip. We didn't do that yesterday. We did a soft double. And when you do that, you're kind of caught in no man's land, because there was one time, forgot who it was. I think it was AD, and he was guarding. I think Dylan was guarding him, and Jaren was helping basically at the block. And then basically Jared Vanderbilt just flashed to the middle, of the paint and just got an easy dunk because Jaren was like he didn't commit to the double, and then on top of that, not only he didn't commit, you're supposed to help the helper, the other guy on the weak side didn't help over, so it was just an easy dunk or easy layup. So they got to figure that out. I think they're probably going to change up. If I'm thinking about what they're going to do, they're probably going to force them to take long twos or try to do that. They'll live with the mid-range jump shots, especially with Rui. They'll probably live with that because I mean the game plan was simple. They wanted him to take shots. Like I think you said he's 32% for the season. I think he's 29% as a Laker. So like it was even worse. So I get why they play percentages, but you do got to get a hand up at some point, or you do got to adjust to it. And I think they will. But just like I said, the keys in this series, it was obviously the fouls and the free throws. The free throws, we had the same amount of free throws. Rebounding, we got to be better with the second chance point or the second chance opportunities at times. We gave him a little bit too much. And obviously the shooting and the role players. Role players are the difference. Like, no disrespect to us, but you're not going to win any game if basically Rui Hachimura outscores your bench combined. Like, Luke only gave you 7 points. Tyus gave you 9 points. Santi gave you 8, and Roddy gave you 0. And then when we're talking about threes, they gave you 3 threes off the bench. Rui by himself off the bench gave you 5. And then that's not even account for Dennis and Troy Brown hitting one apiece. So, like, this is hard to overcome that. Especially when you're not getting that offensive production. So, guys, we're going to have to figure out a way to get Luke more shots. We're going to figure out a way to get especially now Tyus, obviously, because we'll get to it later, but Tyus is going to try to find more shots. I do like that the offense was rolling, though. Like, Santi didn't seem scared of the shots he was taking. Outside of a couple unill-advised Dylan Brooks shots, I like most of the shots that we got. Like, I wasn't really that mad, especially like you talking about with Jaren, to talk about Jaren. That was my worry about Jaren, not the offense, but just staying on the floor. But he only finished with 3 fouls. Like, he only finished with 3 fouls. And I think one of them was probably questionable, to be honest with you. But, like, I like the aggression, the mindset. He wasn't scared of LeBron. And it's funny because Lakers fans were showing a clip last year when LeBron was guarding him, and Brown was pushing Jaren off that block, and like he couldn't get past him. And now you see it develop of Jaren where he's just not like LeBron had no chance. Like, and LeBron's strong. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, LeBron's strong as hell. But like Jaren is still like he's 6'11", 7 feet, 240, 250. Like, and he was just getting to the spots. Like, and he was being patient. That was really the main thing. He wasn't rushing it. He's being patient.
Yes.
Because he usually didn't get his turn. Because usually like there were times where a double would come, and before he would either swing the elbow or he would travel. But there was times where he would ball fake, duck through, and then get a hook. Like, little stuff like that. And you see that. And also the passing, too. Like, being patient with the passing. There was a pass he had to Santi that he probably wasn't going to make in January. So he's growing, like, really fast in front of our eyes. And that's the thing. Like, he had 31, and he probably, to me personally, probably could have had more, or probably at certain times he could have had. Like, there was a time where we didn't go away from him, or we did go away from him. He could have had more. Like, maybe my only complaint with Jaren's game is maybe he could have rebounded a little bit better, but I say that as a team, like, because people look at bigs and they say, oh, they got to be the main rebounders, but when Jaren is the guy that's contesting every shot in the rim, somebody's got to be down there after that, because Jaren's in the air. He can't box out nobody after that. So that's on the guards. That's on the guards and the wings. Like Dylan, Ja, Bane, like, they got to be able to make sure they're putting bodies on guys or helping over and seeing that. But I mean, like I said, the offense is not really the problem. The defense, because we're a high transition point team, and the Lakers got out in transition quick. Like right after buckets, they were going, and so that's the thing that they got to adjust to. They can't give up. They did it last year, where if you have clear advantages in the playoffs, you can't let the team you're going against have those advantages against you, because then you're just behind the 8 ball. Like with the Warriors, we were one of the best rebound teams last year, and they out rebounded us. Like, you can't do that. You're just putting yourself in a way bigger hole than what you need to be. You can't let the Lakers outscore you in transition and then let them out rebound you by as much as they did. I'm not saying you got to out rebound them by 20, but like, I would love for that to happen, but I don't think it's realistic. But if you can keep it in like a 5 rebound differential range, you're going to be fine. So they got to clean those things up. But like you said, I think it's really about the stops and the game plan, defensive game plan. And I think they'll adjust. I mean, again, like, if role players are going to go off, then maybe it's just not your series. But I am highly doubtful of Rui Hachimura scoring 29 again. Because if that's the case, he needs to start. But, like, I'm
Yeah, like it's one of
I'm
those
not.
things where obviously if you leave him open, like it could happen again, but you don't expect him to do like that's not something that you can expect from him every night. Now,
Exactly.
like the same thing Desmond Bain said, like tip your cap to him for the game that he had. He had an awesome game, and like to do that. And I know that he played in a playoff series for the Wizards too, but this is basically like the first meaningful playoff game he played because I mean they kind of knew that they were not going to win that series back when they had Russ and all that. But
Yeah.
right, so this is really like his first real playoff experience. Same with Austin Reeves. This is like his first playoff game, and he had an awesome game too. So it's like tip your cap to both of those guys, and not to say that they can't change anything and just expect them to just miss shots now. Like that's another thing is I don't want them to go into this game too and be like, we don't have to change anything. They're not going to hit those shots again because at the end of the day, like I said when we first started, these are NBA dudes. There's a good chance that if you leave them open, they're gonna make a lot of shots, and that's why I really think it's just going to be coming down to the defensive scheme and everything. But the offensive boards are going to be an issue because Anthony Davis was absolutely killing them on the boards. There were a couple of questionable calls when it comes to like boxing out and stuff like that. That kind of did hurt the Grizzlies on the boards. I feel like the Grizzlies got a lot of loose ball fouls. Not to say that they were all like wrong or anything like that, or to say that they lost this game because of the refs, because that's definitely not the case. But there were definitely some questionable call. Like I think they called a foul on Ja trying to box out Anthony Davis, and it's
Yeah.
like stuff like that is like, come on, man. Like he's 6'2" trying to box out Anthony Davis. Like there's not much he could really do to get a foul in that situation. Like unless he literally was just like holding on to him by the neck or something. Like there's not much that Ja can do to foul Anthony Davis under the rim. So, like stuff like that is just that's the questionable stuff that I saw. Now, overall, I think the refs were pretty even, and I think they let both teams play a lot. So definitely not to say that was the reason they lost the game, but I think that did hurt them on the boards a couple times because they were in good position to get rebounds and then just had some bad foul calls on them. But I'll also say that when you look at kind of the way that the offense was running, you said you got to get Luke more shots. That's the case, but Luke also has to take shots. Like Luke, I like because this is the thing that I know a lot of Clippers fans were saying coming into it is that Luke only shoots the ball if he's wide open, and it's like, man, if you have the space to get your shot off, we're gonna need him to take those shots just because there's not a lot of like great 3-point shooting on the team. Like we got some good 3-point shooters on the team. But in terms of being like a great 3-point shooter, this is a dude that has one of the highest 3-point percentages in the history of the NBA for his career. It's like I think it was early in the game he came off of a screen and he ended up passing up the shot. It's like you got to be ready to shoot as soon as it touches your hands in this series, because that was another thing. I think the Lakers did a really good job of making it difficult on Bane and Luke Kennard, both getting 3-point shots up. They played really good defense. They also made it hard on Ja because I know Ja probably isn't going to play in game 2, but you can probably see a little bit of the same stuff with Tyus. I don't know if they'll put Vanderbilt on Tyus. They'll probably end up putting Vando on Jaren now. I'm not really sure what all of their kind of adjustments are going to be on that side. But I'd say they probably end up putting Vando on Jaren. I don't know. Probably not Tyus. But when they had Vando on Ja, it was kind of like it was really hard for him to get Vanderbilt off of him just because he was really easy going over these screens. And that's another reason why I think the Grizzlies do miss Steven Adams a lot too, is not just on the boards, but Jerry Vanderbilt, as good of a player as he is, it's going to be very hard for him to kind of get over a Steven Adams screen the way that he was getting over some of Jaren's screens. Because Steven Adams is just a bigger physical body. And it's like you're not just going to go over a screen. Like you are going to feel the screen every time if Steven Adams is out there. And I think that's another thing that they've kind of missed. I mean, if you look at some of Ja's stats, like since Steven Adams has been out, they have been down a little bit too. I think it's just harder for him to get to the rim when Steven Adams isn't out there. So I think we might see a little bit of that with Tyus too, just in terms of the kind of screens and stuff they're getting. But I do think that they have the offensive firepower and they have the players that they need, right, in order to have good offensive possessions and in order to score enough points. The big thing is going to come down to, are they going to be able to get rebounds and are they going to be able to get stops consistently on either LeBron or Anthony Davis if you play them one-on-one, or not allowing not to say you can't ever double team, but like you said, no more soft double teams. Like if you're gonna double team, blitz them and get the ball out of their hands, right? Just like commit to it, or you're gonna have to play them straight up, and you just can't let these shooters get wide open again. Mostly Reeves and Hachimura, because I mean, if you look at the rest of the team, the rest of the Lakers really did not hurt them that much. I mean, D'Lo had 9 points, but he was inefficient. He had some timely shots. I think that he was good as like a playmaker and stuff like that. Like D'Lo had a good game, but D'Lo did not kill them the way that like Reeves and Hachimura. So I think if they can just find a way to limit those open shots, that's going to be the big thing. But the other thing that I will say though is that something that I don't know if you could look at it as encouraging or discouraging, is that this is something that the Grizzlies have been dealing with all season. It's not a new issue that they give up a lot of open threes. This is something that's happened all year. So you can look at it as it's happened all year, so they're not going to change it, or you could look at it as it's happened all year and they found ways to win despite that. So depending on which way you want to look at it, it could be encouraging or it could be discouraging. Knowing me, y'all know I'm probably going to try to look on the bright side. And I think, they've had some of these issues. They've had some of these issues in the past. Like they've had these issues all season, but they have found ways to overcome them. Now, they haven't always, like, not every time, right? Like, obviously, they lost 31 games this season, too. And a lot of those games were because of the things we're talking about now. So it's like none of this is new stuff in terms of watching the Grizzlies and the stuff they do. But we've seen them be better than they were in game one. And knowing that the Grizzlies can play way better than they did in game one, and that was, I don't know if I want to say it was the Lakers' best punch, but that's probably about as good of an offensive game as you're going to get from them, especially when you look at the way that they kind of shot the ball from the three-point line. Not to say that they're never going to like hit those shots, but they hit 16 threes. Like that's not their MO. So if the Lakers hit 16 threes, they're going to win most of those. Like they're going to win the game. That's basically how it's going to be. So they're just going to have to limit that going into game two.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, I'm looking at this now again. Like I'm looking like 80 and Braun weren't even the. If I'm looking at it right, yeah, like Braun, like 80 and Braun were the second, third, and fourth leading scorers. Like Reeves had 23 and Rui had 29. Like if that happens again, like you just tip your cap. Like that's all I got for real. Because it's like that, like role players gonna play well, but like that's why you play the numbers like this. You play like this for a reason. Like I've seen crazy guys like Rui or somebody have Rui Hachimura type games. Like I remember, I think it was 2019 against like it was the Raptors and I think the Magic, and like DJ Augustine had like 35 or something 30 like in the game one, and they won that game. And like, but after that he didn't do anything. Not to say he didn't score at all, but like he wasn't averaging 20 that series. So we've seen stuff like this in the playoffs. It's the playoffs for a reason. Like, we saw Grant Williams last year go crazy in the game 7. And then that was the only time he scored like 15 points again. Like we've seen this stuff happen, but that's part of winning. Like you need your role players to give you those type of games. We saw it last year with BC. So we need probably, in my opinion, at least one of those guys to get going, at least Luke or Santi. I'm not saying they got to have 20, 30 points. But I mean, if Luke gives you 18 points tomorrow or Wednesday, that could change the whole game. Santi give you 15. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that can change the whole game if they give you more points than them, especially their bench, the Lakers bench. If they give you more points than them, then you're really you're in a decent situation. But yeah, no, I mean, I think they're gonna clean things up. I mean, I saw Jaren's post game, like he said, they know the game plan, like they know what they need to do. They just need to clean stuff up, like. And really Jenkins, I saw his thing too. I think he was talking about the same things we're talking about, but really just the transition and the offensive rebounds. Like that's the things they really got to clean up first. I think once they clean that up, you'll be fine. And obviously making more shots, but like they had a lead in this game at points. Like it's not like the only time I really felt like they didn't really have it. Cause like they really, like you were talking about with the refs, they didn't really, the game was called cool. Like it was all right. Like it wasn't bad. I do feel like there was no flow in the first half. But once they got a flow, like in towards the end of the first half and then early third, that's when you started seeing how the Grizzlies usually play. So, I think they got to, I'm not really worried about this. And we've seen this team respond. Like I remember last year when Ja went out in game 3, he went out And the game 4 we lost, but obviously we came back home and we smoked the Warriors. Like, you know what I mean? And even in that game 6 with no job, we were close in that series, and they went on to win the championship. So, and that was last year with a worse version of Jaren and a messed up Bane with a messed up back from Bane. So like now they're healthy, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, the series is not over, but you do tomorrow or Wednesday's a must win. Keep saying tomorrow, but Wednesday's a must win definitely. But I feel confident in this team still. I'm not going to just doubt this team. Like, they didn't win 51 games for a reason or no reason. They didn't win 35 games at home for no reason. Like, they've shown what they've been able to do in adversity. Like, they've usually responded. So, I'm very interested to see how they do respond.
Yeah, for sure. And then talking about like getting into the last part, I think the most disappointing part obviously is Ja getting injured, kind of re-aggravating that hand injury and making it a lot worse. Like, I think it's definitely worse now than it was, no question. He said the pain was on a 10 and everything like that. So I'm pretty sure Ja's not going to play game 2. One thing that might help is they do have 2 games off after game 2 as well, to maybe that gives them a little bit extra rest. But based on the kind of quotes that were coming out, they were talking about he couldn't even like unball his own socks like after the game, and he just could not grip anything with that hand. I'm not expecting him to play. Luckily, the Grizzlies still do have Tyus Jones, who has been awesome as a starter this year. The Grizzlies haven't been as dominant without Ja this year. I think they're still like 11-10 without Ja this year, so a little bit like basically 500. So they're not as dominant as they were last season. Part of that is because they don't have the same quality of role players, like at least before Luke got there. I think Luke did help a lot, but they didn't have the same quality of role players when you look at a guy like DeAnthony Melton or a guy like Kyle Anderson. So they weren't able to sustain the Ja injuries as well, but also the way that they sustained the Ja injuries last year is something that you cannot expect every year. But I do think that when you look at the way Tyus plays and even the way Tyus played in game 1, I feel like the offense flowed really well when Tyus is in the game. We've seen him when Ja was out with that suspension as well. He really took over, and it allowed for Jaren to continue to kind of grow into what we saw like in game 1 and how great he played. So I think that's something that could be very interesting, like going through the rest of the series too.
Yeah, Tyus played well. He only had 9 points, but obviously, like, to your point, I'm just gonna go ahead and say, like, I don't think Ja's gonna play. I just going off that press conference. Obviously, like I said, I've been wrong before and I'll be wrong again. I watched that press conference. I watched the press conference, and it sounds like somebody that knows they probably not gonna play. It just sounds like somebody that knows he's not gonna play another game unless we advance past first round, and maybe, because I don't think it's like, obviously it's not fracture, but it is hurt more than what it was. So it sounded like somebody that is not going to play. And I mean, we've been in the spot before. So, it's just next man up mentality. Like, even Jaren said it, like, next man up. You've seen it. Like, he said it, you've seen it with us. Like, we've usually done that. So, and I think the thing about it that hurt in terms of the jaw injury is that he was starting to figure out, like, the game. Like, he was, in terms of like the flow, like where his spots were at, because he was taking some floaters. He even took some mid-range jump shots, which I was glad to see. He knocked down a few, and I'm like, okay, so I'm like, okay, fourth quarter. I'm like, because Jaren and Bane had 20 apiece already. Ja was only with 18, so I'm like, okay, well, he finna turn up. Like, it's the time where we're gonna take over the game. And then, boom, injury happens, and then obviously I didn't know what happened too much, obviously, but then once you saw the replay, so it's just unfortunate, but but that's part of the playoffs. Like, playoffs, you got to have a little bit of luck, and that's the luck part about it, like being healthy, war of attrition, basically. Who usually the teams that make it the furthest are the healthiest. Like, that's just what it is. Like, and I mean, obviously, not saying you're always going to be healthy. Like, the Bucks won a championship without one of their starters, so it is doable because they had their best 3 players. But obviously, when your best player go down, like, it's tough. Like, there's no way around it. Like, it's just tough. Like, so, and that's not saying it's over, but just saying it just makes it that, the margin of error that much slimmer. So they got to really lock in on everything that they're doing, whether it's the little things, guys got to step up. Obviously, Jaren, like, he had 31. Shoot, he might have go for 40. I mean, shoot, he had, and last game he had 21 shots. That probably needs to be like 25, 30. You know what I mean? And then obviously Bane had 18. That probably needs to be 25. Like, Tyus had, I think, 7 shots. He probably need 15, 18. Like, so, like, guys are going to have to step up make up for what Ja's gonna, or what Ja's, obviously you can't make up what Ja does, but compensate in ways that make up for that loss in some type of capacity. So, yeah, I think I'm not really, Tyus is, I think it's gonna be fun, or he's gonna be all right to play and start. But I'm really interested to see Roddy play a little bit more. Obviously, he only played 8 minutes, but obviously, I'm not saying he's gonna play like 25, but like you move Tyus to start lineup now, that makes you only have Luke and Santi off the bench if you're not gonna play Roddy more minutes. And I mean, I don't know. They didn't play Concha 30 seconds. So like, I think it's going to be Roddy, the guy that plays a lot more minutes. And obviously they try to put him on Braun, and which I think they'll probably try to do again. So I'm interested to see that too, in terms of see how many more minutes he gets on Wednesday.
Yeah, for sure. But it's gonna be real interesting to see kind of what happens in game 2 and throughout the rest of the series. But the last thing, we got to end on a positive note. Doesn't have really anything to do with the playoffs right now. Is Jaren Jackson Jr. has been named your 2023 Defensive Player of the Year. I know we campaigned for it last week when some of the first couple votes came out, and it was going the way of Evan Mobley and Draymond Green and Brook Lopez, but it's like we now know Jaren has rightfully been crowned Defensive Player of the Year, averaged 3 blocks a game this season, everything like that. And really just the impact he had, it couldn't be denied. And I'm glad that everybody really noticed that. And the stat that we got to bring up, we talked about Sean earlier. Shout out Sean again. Jaren is like first team all defense hasn't come out yet, but since the same people vote for first team all defense, there's no way he's going to win Defensive Player of the Year and not be first team all defense. That wouldn't make any sense. So
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to be the first player in the history of the NBA to have 2 first team all defense selections and a Defensive Player of the Year at the age of 23. And when you think about like all the great players that have come through the NBA, to be the first person to do anything is always like that's going to be an accomplishment. But especially when you look at the fact that he is now he is on his way to having like a historic defensive career if he can continue like this level of play. Because he's only going to get better at this point. He's still only 23 years old. He has a lot of room to improve. And one thing they talked about the minutes argument. Oh, he didn't play enough minutes. Imagine when he starts playing like 31 minutes a game. Like the numbers are going to be ridiculous. Imagine if he didn't miss the first 15 games of the season with an injury. So I think this is the first of multiple Defensive Player of the Years, I think, for Jaren. I think he's probably going to get another one.
Yeah. Listen, I'm happy. Like I said, I think I said on Twitter, this is my championship, obviously, to some extent. Obviously, I'm joking in a way, but like this is what I wanted to see. I mean, again, like with Jaren, like I think, like you said, like he is one of the youngest people to do it, second youngest to win it behind Dwight, and then one of the 4 23-year-olds to win it is him, Kawhi, Alvin Robinson, and Dwight. And like again, like you said, he can be better. Like this same dude who still has foul troubles, same dude. And obviously he's been better as a rebounder, but he still could, in my personal opinion, I think he can rebound a little bit more. He could get you up to like 8 rebounds. And I think his fouls can go from like 3.6 to like 3.1 or 3.1, 3.2. So like there's a lot of room to grow, like still. And he might not have the crazy block numbers as much, obviously, because maybe, like maybe people still gonna try him. I mean, I guess, if they go ahead and do it, that works for me. It's gonna just help his stats even more. But yeah, like he's literally on pace to be one of the best defenders in this decade. Like that's not even me like trying to be like biased or anything. Like literally, like this is a special dude you're watching. And I mean they said that obviously at the draft, like when he was coming out, like he could be a special defender, this and that, blah blah blah. But obviously his progression hasn't been linear in terms of his game. Like at first it was just like, okay, first season he was solid offensive player, solid defensive player with potential. Then the second year he blossomed into an offensive engine, shooting threes. People thought he was going to shoot 40% from 3, but his defense still, kind of not took a step back, but still had the foul issues. Then obviously got hurt in the bubble. Then the third year, he only came back 11 games. You didn't really get to see much of that. Then last year, good defender, but his offense was inefficient. And then this year, you finally see it put together. And again, like I said, there's still another level as we're seeing. Like Jaren had 31 yesterday, and like he was eating, like he was like looking like that dude. Like, and again, I think there's a lot more he could still do. Like he could still be a better playmaker. Like And like you said, better rebound. Like, he still got a lot more to do. And I remember, folks, I'm not gonna say who, obviously, but because there's a lot. I remember the conversations around Jaren year 3, like I said, year 2, year 3, even last year, like people talking about like trading him and this, like he's not that dude. Like, and I'm like, some of this stuff that y'all talking about trading him for was out of his control, like having an injury that he couldn't control, like the foot injury. Like, people get hurt, like that's gonna happen. Like, he just had an unfortunate start in terms of his, career in terms of having injuries, but like he couldn't help that. It's not like in playing a spot that needs time, like you need reps to play. A lot of this is natural progression. Like, a guy with Jaren's talent, I'm not gonna say always figures it out, but usually you see them type dudes, they usually figure it out. Now, it's not saying they're gonna figure it out at the same time, or like, year 5, year 6, but they're gonna figure it out eventually. It's just hard to not see that person figure out how to play this game if you play it enough. And obviously we're seeing that now. And there's still another level. He's only 23 years old. Shoot, I'm older than Jaren by a year. Dude, he's still gonna get better. And like you said, like defensively, like this year was special. Like, he didn't and he was talking, like, you know what I mean? Like, he was playing well. And like you said, the minutes restriction, whatever you want to call it, like, imagine when he starts playing 32, 33 minutes. Like, it's gonna be kind of crazy. Like, and mind you, we still won 51 games in spite of him missing them games and him playing limited minutes in time. So imagine when that doesn't happen. Like, this dude could still be scary. Like, so, like, yeah, like, appreciate this man. Because listen, not everybody has him. Everybody want to talk about Jaren, but every team wants a Jaren. So that's all I'm gonna say. Everybody want to talk about Jaren, like this and that. Like, he's not like that dude. I'm not saying he's the best player, but like, like in the league or nothing. But like, he's a great player. He's a player that you need to win championships. Like,
if you talk about two-way players in the NBA, I don't know. Especially first of all, if you're talking about like forwards and you're talking about two-way players, I don't know if you can get to 5 before you name Jaren. If you talk about two-way forwards, like I don't know if there are 5 guys that people right now, especially when you consider his age, would take over Jaren. So that's just the way that I feel. Especially when you look at how much better he still can get, and I think that's the big thing. Is obviously like he won Defense Player of the Year this year. Like I said, I think he can still he could probably be a multiple time winner, especially when you look at the fact he's only 23 right now. Obviously that depends on a lot of stuff like health, especially with the new games played, stuff that they're going to be added coming in the next CBA and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of things that have to happen for that to happen. But when you look at like the foundation that he has already, and the fact that, especially like since the All-Star break, this is a dude that has been averaging over 21, 22 points per game on offense, 22. Right? Mm-hmm. Then you go in, he's going to have another offseason. Hopefully he can just stay healthy throughout the rest of this playoff run, have another offseason to continue to work and come back. And this dude is going to come back next year, and he's going to be incredible too. Not to say that we just looking ahead to next year already or anything like that. Yeah. Looking at the progression of how good that he can get, like in the next few years, if he can stay healthy, it's going to be crazy. And like, you don't want to throw out like a bunch of comparisons, so I'm not going to do that. But he has the potential to be the best two-way player in the NBA, like at his peak. Like, he has that level of potential.
Yeah, and I was going to say, this is not my comparison. Please. I mean, I agree with it to some degree. I'm not saying he's going to be the same player. Before y'all hear me out, listen, I don't know if y'all seen it. I don't know if you've seen it too, Bryson, but there's a video when Jaren was, before he got drafted, he's working out with Kevin Garnett. And he was talking about, Kevin was like, hey, I see some myself in you. And he was talking to him. And he basically said, I'll have to probably post a clip on Twitter, but he's basically saying, you could be, or he was basically saying, he could be or is the Kawhi of bigs. Basically, he can get you points and can get you a stop on the other end. And obviously, that sounds kind of crazy. And I'm not saying he's going to be 25 or 26 a night. But like you said with the two-way stuff, a lot of guys, especially that one defensive player of the year in the last few years, I mean, you can name Giannis. And I mean, I'm trying to think of one more. I'm trying to think of, that might be it off the rip that was averaging like close to 20. Rudy Gobert was averaging like 13. And then you got Draymond Green, he averaged 7. Like, Jaren's at 19 points this year, like 18.6, basically 19. And that's with limited fouls, like you said, like limited foul, foul trouble. I still think the 3-ball can get back a little bit higher than what it is. I think he shot like 34, 35%. I think that can be 37% 75%. Free throws, I think he could be 80%. So like he's leaving points on the board still. And I think he can still add another element to his floater game. Like there's a lot to still add, like because there, like you saw it yesterday, he can get to some counters. Like he'll go to his left, but he'll get back to the right. He used to do that a lot more. But obviously, I wouldn't get back to my counter anyway if they can't stop me going left. It's like with Zach Randolph. We never saw Zach Randolph use his right hand maybe a few times. Like he's always gonna get to his left. So if it's unstoppable, then you got to stop it. And if they do, he's still got to counter for it. And so, I'm just hoping he can go healthy into the offseason. Obviously, again, we're not saying this is over. I'm ready to see Jaren on Wednesday. I feel like he's gonna ball out, like he's gonna hoop, especially getting that award in front of the in front of the fans. Oh yeah. He gonna hoop. I think he gonna hoop. So, obviously, like you said, like he could be one of the best two-way players. And obviously, like I said, that's a championship level player. So like not everybody has these type players on their team. And we got 3 guys who I believe can be like guys that can lead you to an actual core championship. So you just gotta trust the process and understand like this is all part of it, like the injuries and the ups and downs, like it's all part of it. So you just gotta see it through. Like these guys are 23, 24 years old. Like their best days are still ahead of them if you really think about it and look at the history of the league. So shout out to Jaren, man. Shout out to Jaren. That's all I gotta say. Shout out to Jaren.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to Jaren and shout out to everybody who listened to this episode of the Next Gen podcast. And we will see you guys again next week. I think we will be through game 4 by the time we come back. So
3 or 4. It's like 3 or 4.
So there's going to be a lot more stuff to talk about. Go see how to break down, 2 or 3 playoff games in one episode. It might be a longer episode. But thank y'all to everybody who listened to this episode, and we will see y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.